Well, I bet my soul on a 6-string gamble, and I climbed like hell through the brush and the bramble. Hey, even though I had my doubts, told myself don't look down, and I turned that hill into a pile of gravel. It was only a mountain, nothing but a big old rock. Only a mountain, it ain't hard if you don't stop. It just took a little step, a right then a left, then a couple million more. Who's counting? Hell, that's only a mountain. Well, you better know the bottom if you wanna be a climber, 'cause there's always another one a little bit higher. Just when I think I'm finally done, I'm staring at another one. So I reach down deep and I lace them up tighter. It was only a mountain, nothing but a big old rock. Only a mountain, it ain't hard if you don't stop. It just took a little step, a right then a left, then a couple million more. Who's counting? Hell, it's only a mountain. Now I'm standing on the top with the sweat behind me. Yeah, you gotta look up if you ever wanna find me.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Rest Period podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Riddle, and I'm here with my fellow co-hosts, Matt and Kyle.
Welcome back.
Nice to be back, boys.
Today we got a good topic for you guys. We're going to be talking about faith and endurance. And, faith, it's a pretty broad topic, but we want to try to tie it into like how that kind of sticks to our core message of fitness, but also kind of like the stuff we like to talk about, mindset and other things like that. So I think we're going to have a good episode today, guys.
Speaking of faith and endurance, we have our fearless leader back with us today. We got Kyle Lombardi, a.k.a. Kyle Ramsey, back on the track.
Really happy to be back, guys. You guys rocked it on episode 2. It was awesome. Thanks, Nick Merkel, by the way. I watched the whole thing. These guys they're natural. They're greats. They care deeply about this, and I think they wanted to talk about where the future is going. I'll kind of leave that to those two. They're doing a lot of the technology work and a lot of the stuff, so I'll leave it to those guys. All right.
Yeah, we got a better setup now. Again, episode 3. We just keep making upgrades. The space that we're in is a lot more finished, so it's a lot nicer. We got the couch. We got a finished floor, so we're just going to keep making upgrades, upgrading the lighting, upgrading the audio where it needs to get upgraded. But yeah, I'm really excited about the future.
Yeah, we learned how to use light bulbs, and so we're ready to go.
And with that, guys, it's time to pop the Rogans.
Dangerous.
Dangerous.
Too easy.
Too easy. It's too easy. The rest period. Let's go, man.
That tastes good, boys.
All right. Who wants to start us off? Faith and endurance. Kyle, why don't you start us off?
So I'll start with the faith side. So I grew up a Lutheran. I converted to Catholicism right before I got married. And it was kind of an interesting change, but not really that different. But I think Matt's going through something kind of similar. But my wife was a Catholic her whole life. And I got to know her church a little bit, St. Joseph's Parish in Grafton, Wisconsin. And, ever since then, I've just taken faith, just more and more seriously and gotten into, just some things that I, 10 years ago didn't even think about. So I'll cover that more, but why don't you guys cover, your initial parts of faith or what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think it's it's actually kind of funny. I don't think we'd be here doing this podcast today if not for kind of the similarities between, or at least, what I see as similarities between mine and Kyle's kind of faith journeys. I didn't really grow up with a super strong affiliation to any religion. Just kind of broadly Christian. And as part of getting engaged and leading up to my wedding, I mentioned this before, but I converted to Catholicism. So I took the OCIA classes, and in that journey, I was, training with Kyle every week. So he was kind of a sounding board for me, I think, just to get a kind of an informal place to just talk about, I guess, some of the more practical applications of it, not just in a classroom and learning about the history of faith, but more so, just talking to another guy about like how you fold some of those things into life and use it to deal with just practical questions that we all face. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see how the dots have all connected. And now, we're sitting here on a podcast. You never know what's going to happen next. So yeah, having that foundation in faith definitely helps strap you in for the ride.
Yeah, and then for me, my journey in faith, I grew up Christian. My parents are Christian, so I grew up going to church. But I was never like in a church that was like a denomination or anything. Like I wasn't Catholic or Lutheran or anything like that. It was always non-denominational kind of thing. But I started off with a very good baseline for faith, but I do feel like kind of later in my life, I kind of like lost my faith a little bit and wasn't really that into like the whole God thing. But I think as I got older, and especially after I got into college and kind of the stuff that I went through my freshman year of college, which we can get into, I really found my faith. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with my faith journey. At least that's how it started. And we can go into more detail as we kind of talk here. But
Well, I think it's cool. And I think Matt said this and Isaac said this, but, those two have been training with me for a decent amount of time. I've known Isaac a lot longer, but I think all three of us kind of view the world in a similar way as far as how you treat people and how you do things. And whether you're, Catholic, Christian, Lutheran, whatever it may be, right? We're all focused on similar things. And I think that relates to fitness and how we can be better versions of ourselves. So, I know these two guys really well. They are very good role models for their friends, I'm sure, and people in their lives. For me, my parents were Lutheran as well. So obviously, they took me to church and they did those things. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like when I got married and then obviously I have kids now, having a religion and I'm Catholic, but that could be Lutheran, non-denominational Christian, whatever, whatever you're choosing to be. But, having that faith and then being able to pass that on to your kids, I think is pretty powerful. And something that I look forward to with my own children now that I, am further along in this journey. So, and then on the fitness end of, how does fitness endurance relate to faith? I've gotten more perseverance and more things out of faith that have taught me how to, work through a marathon or work through, I know these guys talked a lot last week about endurance things and Ironmans and all this cool stuff, cool topics. And I've kind of had similar examples of that. And sometimes you end up praying during a marathon, right? Or you find gratitude in things you don't even think about. So fitness and endurance work relating into faith is so powerful, I think, for me and for you guys. But
yeah, definitely. I think, there's really no time, or let me start over. Like it's, I think for me, the big thing about faith is just that it helps you move through uncertain times. And like, there's really no more intense version of that, or at least, in my experience, than when you're pushing your body past your limits or past what you previously thought were your limits, right? Like at that point, for me, it's like when I'm out there doing a marathon or just training, you realize that you have to just trust that your heart's going to keep beating, your legs are going to keep pumping, your eyes are going to stay open and you're going to keep driving. And so like, it definitely pushes you to that nth degree when you're just leaning on something other than, your direct authority and control, to get you through what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I just feel like when I think of faith, and my journey in faith, I think more of it like it really just gives you like a purpose. Like I feel like I used faith as a way to give me like a purpose, and I feel like early in my life, I put my value into things like wrestling. Like how good am I? How good of a wrestler am I? That's how valuable I am. Like how good am I in the classroom? That's how valuable I am. Whereas like when I started to grow in my faith, I realized that my worth is not defined by those things. My worth is defined by how God defines my worth. And how God defines my worth is that we're all image bearers of the all high God. And for that reason, we have worth, we have value. And that's kind of like my outlook on faith. It just really gave me, uh, it made me see my value beyond just the things I do. And it just really helped me in that way. So.
That makes a lot of sense, Isaac. I mean, I think it relates to a lot of athletes or people in general who, struggle to find identity, and they struggle to find like, who am I, right? Like, why am I here? Why am I on earth, right? When I started basically reading more of Pope John Paul II, I started to realize a lot of those, the things you just said. I'm like, wow, he's saying so many interesting things. I actually wrote down a few of his quotes, but one that I really like, Pope John Paul II is one of my, I just think he's one of the best popes that we've had. But one thing he says, the future starts today, not tomorrow. And something that means to me, and you guys can talk about it, but, not living in your past, right? So, not being stuck in what you used to do. So if in college you struggled with faith or you struggled with sin, and we all do, right? We all do things that we're like, man, I feel terrible about that. But being able to listen to those words and say, you know what, it starts today, right? Like we are going to move forward. Faith gives you something to move forward with, right? Like a way to live, a guidance, and if you kind of view it that way, I think the guidance in that, and for us, it's Christianity, right? It kind of makes life easy to live if you just focus on the right things. It's not easy though, right? It's too easy for us, but, it's very difficult, obviously, for a lot of people because if you actually look at the absolute truths of what Christianity says, a lot of people are like, wow, that's kind of a tough life to live, right? Like, oh, don't compare yourself to your neighbors, don't covet things. You only have one God and that's your focus. Don't have idols in your life. But all of those things are kind of tough to follow through with. And I agree with Isaac and Matt. I'm like, in college, I struggled with that too. And eventually you find your way through it. And for us, I think we all found that strength and that passion for God and for Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that Christianity is not easy. Like being a Christian is not easy. Like it's a narrow path, but it gives you hope for a better future. It gives you something to look forward to in the end, that like this is not all that there is. But it also, it's just a great blueprint to live your life. Like there's no doubt that the moral system that's set up through Christianity is extremely good for everybody. This country was very much founded on those principles. And, I just think it's a great way to live your life. And I think it gives you hope for a better future.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we can dive into kind of around, religion. I think before doing that, something that I feel strongly is, there's a big difference between faith and religion. Like, to me, faith is really trusting that there's something out there more meaningful than your own experience. And I know like that's something I've struggled with. That's something I know a lot of people have struggled with. But believing that you don't have to find every answer yourself. You don't have to, again, like I kind of said earlier, you don't have to control your way through life. You can just kind of trust and believe that God has your back. Or if you're not in a place where you can say God has your back, at least you believe, something bigger has your back. And you believe you can kind of get through hard times by having that trust. I think religion is kind of the implementation of that trust, right? Like how do you take those kind of raw feelings and turn them into a lifestyle and a set of behaviors that you can actually, use to stay true to your faith and what you believe, to, each day to make meaningful progress towards your goals, have meaningful relationships, have people around you that you care about. And, obviously, like any big human thing in this world, when you get into religion, it can get challenging, right? You can kind of get lost in the hairy details of things. I will say, when I was going through kind of my own journey of figuring out what was my religion, I knew I had a strong faith. It took me 20 years of life to realize how strong my faith was. But I didn't know what my religion was, honestly. I knew I was raised Christian. But I read this book, actually. It was called One World, Many Religions by Mary Pope Osborne, who's actually the same woman that wrote The Magic Tree House, that I think a lot of kids, or a lot of people in our generation are familiar with. And yeah, it kind of just walked through, all kind of the 7 major religions in the world, and historically how they all interrelate. And to me, it was a pretty beautiful book to read, because I was like, something that can kind of intimidate people, I think, with Christianity and with a lot of religions, is just the idea that there is one God, or like my God is better than your God. But when you look at the history of it, it all does go back to that same, human experience. So, whether Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever, I think, for me, that was helpful, just to kind of really try to get to the root of it. And, that book kind of inspired me to do other reading, and figure out kind of more connections, thousands-year-old connections between these different religions. And I think it helped me kind of understand that it is a shared human faith that I think we all have, regardless of how we choose to implement it. So.
Yeah. And then going into endurance a little bit, I think something that I've looked at a lot is, basically after college, after the partying, after all this stuff, I kind of started viewing my body differently. And you guys train with me, like you guys take care of yourselves as well. But something that I started realizing you can relate, in the Bible, it says, your body is basically a temple of the Holy Spirit. And when I started to realize, like, hey, this is biblical, this is, training is great. Like, I learned a lot about training in college and past college, but when I started to view it differently, like, okay, taking care of myself and doing all these things, this is in the Bible too, and I don't think I thought about that as a younger person. I didn't. In high school, I'm going through all these classes to get confirmed. I never thought about that, right? I didn't think about how my body's a temple, and, what I put in it is very important. But, as you start training and start realizing, okay, now I'm educated on that side of things, it kind of all relates to each other. And it's kind of interesting when you treat your body like a temple, right? When you actually do that, when you eat well, when you take care of yourself, it's crazy how you feel so much better. But it makes faith easier then, right? You have faith in that. You have not only faith in God, if you believe in that, but you have faith in yourself that you can do something like that. And that relates to training, right? So that's what we always are going to do, that, right? Like, bring back the principles of, have faith, be strong in what you think, but also understand that your body is a temple, and realize you can take care of that temple so well. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect, right? Like, people are still going to have their fun, but just doing your best with, like, okay, if you go to the gym, just, doing your best effort, right? It doesn't mean it needs to match Isaac's effort, because that guy's crazy strong, right? But, or Matt's effort, dude's running an Ironman, but whatever that is for you, right? Like, treat your body like a temple. And that means different things to us three. That means different things to people that are listening. But I really believe in that. And I think, taking care of yourself mentally as well, and physically, and the soul, it all relates to what we're talking about, I think. And you guys can add to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said. Making sure that you take care of your body, treating it like a temple, like it actually is extremely important. But I also think it's important just because, you should be taking care of yourself for the people on earth that care about you. If you're not taking care of yourself, you run the risk of so many different health complications later in life. And it's like, speaking for myself, I want to be around for a decent amount of time to, be there for the people that I care about. So that's why I really put an emphasis on making sure that I take care of my health. And, starting it early is extremely important, because I feel like, kind of like you said, like a lot of young people, they don't necessarily think that much about it because you can get away with a lot of stuff when you're young. But as you get older, kind of that stuff starts to add up. Like all of a sudden, all of that partying, all that drinking, all that stuff when you were young, it catches up to you when you're like in your 30s and 40s and 50s. So if you don't start taking care of yourself now, you're going to have a lot more issues in the future.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking on that, I mean, faith is so closely tied to physical endurance, to physical strength, to fitness. I mean, you look at, again, looking at Christianity, but other religions have very similar models. Like, we have 10 core commandments, right? And it's nothing very complicated. It's kind of just, when you're not sure what to do, read these 10 instructions and kind of make your decision and then move forward, right? And that's not that dissimilar to like fitness, right? There's not that many body parts. There's not that many different ways to train. Really, the people I think that find the most success have 10 or so kind of core tenets, and work around those, right? Like you use those to figure out when you're injured, how do you deal with it? When you're, when you're training for endurance, how do you kind of change your plan in accordance with, some pretty basic, what are physiological things. So, I think they're, super similar, I guess, ways of thinking.
Yeah. And like, just like tying faith to like the fitness side of things, kind of what you said, I think faith is extremely important in fitness, and it's just having, just being able to put your trust into something and believing it's going to work. I think if you're not able to put your trust in things here on earth, it's going to be hard to put your trust in God. I think from a fitness standpoint, like whatever your goals are, doesn't really matter. It's just like being able to put a plan together and knowing that if I follow this plan and I have discipline to follow this plan, I have faith that I'm going to see the results that I want to see. I'm not going to get it today. I'm probably not going to get it tomorrow, but as I keep working at it, I'm going to start to see those results in the gym. And I think that's true for whatever you do in life.
And piggybacking off of that, I've trained a lot of very good athletes, these two included, but it's funny. So like the ones that have faith, or like, they believe in themselves, I don't know, that's one of the strongest indicators of future success, right? They're not necessarily looking for the next day I'm going to be the best athlete in the world, right? Kind of stuff. And faith is hard, and not to say no one can do it. It's one of those things that it takes many years to probably develop the calluses to get to the level that we're at, right? We're a little bit older than some people maybe listening, but I would say just give it time, right? So, continue learning, continue reading, like Matt said. And with physical fitness, I've seen this with every athlete that I train, it might take them 2 or 3 years to get to the highest level possible if they're, in high school or whatever age they are. But the key indicator to me, usually with a kid and an athlete that's in high school or college, if they consistently show up and believe in themselves and they have a positive attitude, and shockingly, a lot of them have faith, it's pretty easy to know that kid's going to do okay. So, oftentimes, people, they don't even appreciate maybe that part of it. That when you go to a gym, a trainer can say, hey, lift this weight or do all these things. But if you don't believe it yourself and you don't think I can take this to a field, obviously that's going to be hard for you to translate that over to an individual sport. So, a lot of kids that I talk to, I'm lucky. I get to see these kids and I get to see the highest level kid in the area. And it's like so many of them, they have faith in them. They have belief that they can do this stuff, right? And I'm kind of lucky and grateful that I have that in my life, because I see that every week. And I know how blessed I am to have that, because this world needs more of that, right? So that's kind of what I'm saying is it's just nice to see all these people that are, they're so strong in their faith, but also they believe they can go out, they can succeed in sport, they can go to school, do well there, they can get jobs, they can succeed there, right? It doesn't matter where you go. These people believe they can do it, right? So it kind of says, it's going back to what Isaac was talking about with identity. like faith is not just for, oh, I'm a great athlete, right? Like it can really give you an identity to look back at and say, this is really the core of who I am, and then I can be successful doing other things now, right? So that's just my outlook on it, I guess. But
Yeah, it's just a great foundation. When you have that core belief in, I think, a power higher than yourself, and you're able to put your faith there, it makes it so much easier to put your faith in other things in your life. And I really think it's a testament to endurance, because I feel like if you're able to just put your faith in a process and believe that if you keep working at it, that you're going to see the results that you want to see, that's really what endurance is about. It's like you have the endurance to keep going and keep working at whatever you're doing until you get to where you want to get. And that's really
Yeah, I guess kind of like leads to a question I have, which is, what do you say to somebody who, maybe they've read the Bible cover to cover, maybe they know all the facts, they've spent their life going to church or practicing a religion, but they don't have faith, right? Like they don't ultimately believe in God or believe in a higher power. What do you say to somebody who's struggling with that?
I guess if I can I jump in? Sorry. I was reading today. Sorry to bring up Pope John Paul II again, but I don't know. He's one of I've studied him more than anyone else, and something that I read about him today, and maybe this would help someone understand what faith might help them with, right? He had a thing called redemptive suffering. And I was reading about today, and what it means is he was shot in 1981 by a guy. I can't remember his name, sorry. But he was shot, and it was at St. Peter's Basilica. So years later, okay, this guy is in jail. Pope John Paul II forgave him, went to the jail to go talk to him, to forgive him in person. So, yeah, there's many ways to view faith, but I think a lot of people miss on the fact that what we should have as Christians, Catholics, whatever Christianity you take on, right, is something that Pope John Paul II said, right? Redemptive suffering. If I'm hurt by someone now, Pope John Paul II's, case, he was shot, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen to anyone listening or us, but the point is, man, he had something really bad happen to him, and he forgave that person, and he went to see him after the fact. How many people do you know would do that, right? And there's something powerful in that, right? No, that's not from the Bible, right? But that's some powerful stuff that if people would take on those traits, I think the world would be a much better place. Yeah, people make mistakes. People do things to you that you're like, man, how can I forgive that person? That's crazy, right? They did something that, I'm never talking to them again. Well, maybe you're looking at it incorrectly, and maybe that's Pope John Paul's, message is, yeah, you don't want to forgive them, but maybe you should. And maybe that's the way you become a better Christian, or this could relate to other religions too. It's just a great way to kind of think. And you guys can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, just like the whole thing of just like, forgiveness for people that wrong you, it's hard. I feel like everything in Christianity is hard. My whole take on forgiveness is that we're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. So I don't really feel like, as somebody that's not perfect, as somebody that is not in charge of judging other people and, bringing punishment on people that sin, because I sin just as much, if not more. I would say that I don't have a right not to forgive them. Because I know that Jesus is forgiving them. I know that Jesus died for all of us, and that he's forgiven them, so I should forgive them. And that's really just kind of my stake on the forgiveness side of things. And then to kind of go back to what Matt was saying, his original question, if you just like approach somebody in the church that they've read the Bible cover to cover, they've heard all the speeches, they've heard all the sermons, and they still just don't seem to have that faith in God that we are all blessed to have, I would say the only thing you can really do for that person is pray for them. And I would say testimony is powerful. Giving somebody your testimony, how you came to God, how you came to learn, just like how much you believe your belief formed, is really impactful on people, because it gives them a story that they can see, that's more tangible to them. It's not just something that happened a long time ago. It's something that happened now in the modern day. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think with like forgiveness, something that goes hand in hand with that is acceptance. So what I mean by that is, like, for me, my faith grew a lot about like 3 years ago. And part of that, for me, it wasn't so much feeling like I needed to forgive others or needed to, forgive conditions in my life. It was more that I just needed to accept life for what it is, almost. Like, and by that I mean, like, so many leaders these days, and also just so many people are in a constant grind, right? You're in a rat race. Like, you want to do things because you want to bear the fruits of doing those things, right? You want to support a family, you want to get a degree, you want to win a gold medal. But first of all, you're not always going to win, and you're not always going to be able to achieve the things you want. But even if you can, like, I think you have to understand, like, what is the point of that journey, right? Like, is that something that is meaningful to you in like your human experience, or is it just getting an accolade or getting a thing, a shiny object, right? Like a false idol. And again, like for me, I grew a lot in my faith at a point where I was actually like having the most career success I'd ever had. I was having the most, by most measurable things, like I was doing very well, but I was actually just struggling because I think I kind of lacked that deeper perspective of like, what is it that I'm doing this for, right? Like, sure, I could provide for a family for however long I need to. Sure, I could like, go find a girl and, check a box of having a wife, but like, for what, right? Like, and even if you're saying for what, it's like, all right, well, there's something wrong there. Like, obviously those are like beautiful things to be able to do, to provide for a family, to fall in love, to, experience kind of the full extent of being human. But without like a deeper reason for it, or, without kind of accepting that you don't need to understand every part of life, you don't need to win all the time. It's hard to really appreciate that process and that journey. At least it was definitely for me, right? Like, you can get raises, you can get promotions, you can try different cities, but what's that really for if you don't actually experience the depth of each step of that process and like feel human in that, and really like enjoy, you have time during that grind to like enjoy all your meals, just enjoy beautiful views, just, feel close to God or to a greater power, and just get to pause and appreciate how crazy and complex the world is, and how cool it is that we all get to live in it.
Yeah, and I think the core of what you just said really comes down to putting emphasis on the journey and not the result. And I think a lot of people, if you put emphasis on the result, you're just never going to really find happiness, because you're going to get to that goal and then it's like, oh, well, now I have another goal I got to get to, so I'm not happy yet. So then you get to the next goal, but then it's like, oh, now I got to get to another goal. So you're really just taking your happiness and you're throwing it over the fence, and you're giving yourself another mountain or another fence to climb over, when it's like, if you really find happiness in the journey to accomplishing something, regardless of if you accomplish it or not, that's where I think true happiness comes from, because 99% of your time you're in the journey. It's like very temporary to you actually get the goal or whatever you accomplish, and it's a very fleeting moment, but then you're right back on the journey and going towards another goal.
And I think in the training world, if I can bring it to training or fitness, you guys are both spot on. And it's funny. So like, a lot of athletes struggle with the process of things, right? The journey of things. Coaches often, trainers talk, about the process of getting to, wherever we're going, right, as an athlete. But, the best athletes in the world, oftentimes they don't worry about the Olympic gold medal necessarily. They really love the grind and the process of things, which is kind of what we're saying. Don't overlook how Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is for you. Don't, great result maybe in 2 months as you run a 4-minute mile, right? But I think the result is just a product of you allowing the process to happen, right? And trusting and faith and all those things that we're talking about. And that's kind of the whole point of this podcast is bringing it back to like believe in that and have faith and endurance stuff. So Ironmans for me, like when I look at Matt, I know how he trains in the gym with me, for example, but that guy has faith that he's going to get through that Ironman, and he's not too worried, I don't think, about how fast it is, or he's on the grind and he's loving the process and the journey of it. And with Isaac, it's like we just love getting in the gym, we love lifting weights, but that guy is so much more than just lifting weights, right? So it's the same thing that we're talking about, the journey and the process that us three are on. I could care less if I do 100 muscle ups. I don't care. I know athletes might put those big goals up there and like that's their thing, right? But I think in the fitness world, people do, and this is probably the problem with fitness sometimes, is people get very focused on, how many muscle ups did I do today, and how fast was the AMRAP today, and versus just allowing it to be a joyful process, right? And I think that's what you guys are saying, and I would piggyback on the same point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, something that I've been thinking over here is like, it's so much easier to measure something than it is to actually enjoy measuring that thing. Like, and it kind of reminds, like, there's this constant tension, kind of throughout history between like science and faith, right? Where people think that you have to reject one in order to appreciate the other. And I just don't really buy that. Like, I just don't think it's true. Like being able to measure things and being able to build things is an awesome pursuit as humans on this earth, but it shouldn't come at the expense of enjoying measuring those things, right? Like I think it's important to remember, like, you need a reason for why you want to measure that. Like, we shouldn't just build rockets and do whatever, go to Mars, unless there's like, not calling out Elon, but unless there's like a real reason to, right? Like just doing things for the sake of doing them, I don't know, it can get kind of like hedonistic and negative in my opinion. So it's important to like check in and be like, yes, I can measure it. Yes, I guess I'm proud of the fact that I figured out how to do this, but like, why are we measuring this thing? Why do we care? Why am I running 26.2 miles? Is it to check a box and say I did it? Or is it because there's something deeper in that journey that is a rich experience and something worth appreciating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that exploring the creation that God created is God wants us to do that. So, I mean, I feel like our drive to explore things and figure things out, and like that's something that God has obviously ingrained into us. And yeah, I mean, we, like you were saying, I also don't think that science is disproven by faith. I don't feel like somebody that's a Christian has to basically believe that science is wrong because they're a Christian and they believe in the creation story. And I mean, we can get into the topic of creation versus evolution, but I don't necessarily think that there is as mutually exclusive as I've heard people seem to think they are. I think it's very possible that both can be true, that there can be a God that created everything, and there can also be an evolution could be the method in which he did that. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on evolution versus creation, but.
Well, if I could chime in on that, I mean, I think the Big Bang Theory that was brought on by a Catholic priest. So that idea, I mean, if we're gonna intercede the two, they are, right. Like, it's not even a question. Like, we know that science, faith, those things they're connected very much. And it's the Big Bang Theory, whatever people think about it, that's fine. But that was a Catholic priest, or, so he came up with this idea. He was a physicist as well. So, if you're like, hey, Christians can't believe in this kind of stuff, well, that's fine. Everyone has their opinion, but I would just say, like, obviously, Christians did come up with it, and the theories at least. So, I'm a believer of that. I think they're very much connected, and obviously we can't sit back here and say, well, and I've actually heard this thing. So I'm in a That Man Is You program, and they went through like Genesis and Big Bang Theory and some stuff, and they talked about this stuff in a little bit of science terms. But basically what they were saying was, in the first day, the Genesis stuff, it was to portray what was happening, but it didn't mean it was in one day necessarily, right? So, if you look at a broad stroke, like science would not say that as how it happened, maybe perfectly, but I think we can be pretty open to the fact that God did create what we have, and we should be very thankful for that, and we should be thankful God allows us to find new inventions and allows us to research and have science in our world. So we've advanced ourselves pretty much through that. So I think we should believe in that. That's just my take, but.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, again, it gets back to like the why, right? Like, sure, we can fight over how we're going to measure how the universe was created, but like, is that because I want to prove somebody else is wrong, or because they have a false religion, or is it because I think that getting to the bottom of it will provide a lot of positive things for people, right? Like, will it give people peace, or will it lead to other scientific progress that like helps heal people? And so, yeah, it's just like, to me, there's nothing inherently wrong with looking for answers to these problems, but it's like, let's make sure we're doing it in the spirit of like helping our fellow man and not trying to prove him wrong or disqualify what he believes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely with a lot of the science stuff, like we seek to understand. Like, we hate the unknown. It's just like in our nature. We want to understand everything there is to know, but we're never going to understand everything there is to know. And I think the pursuit of knowledge is a good thing. And I think it leads to a lot of benefits to people in our society. And I think that pursuing something that's currently unknown, like, you might not have a reason why right away why you want to pursue that thing, but I feel like pursuing it could lead to benefits for humanity, and that's why you should pursue it. But I also believe that we don't need to know everything. I think that there's important things that we need to know, and I think all of the really important stuff we need to know is in the Bible. I truly believe that, and that how you should live your life and ultimately where you want to go, all can be found in the Bible, and I think that's what's the most important. But I think understanding our universe and how it got here and answering those questions is also just important, and it's good for humans to do.
And piggybacking off of that, I think we all believe in science, right? I mean, we all, we went through high school, colleges, all the stuff that we learned, but also being like skeptical of science sometimes. I would say there's some times where, and this is in my field, so fitness is a good example, but science might say in a study that there's something that I should maybe do with my training. It's funny. It's like I've actually read so much science on training that half the time it's mixed up, meaning like it's not true, but it's not false. It's like, well, yeah, it could work for this population, but this other population doesn't make sense. So to be clear, science, like, yes, it's, there's some evidence with science, but I would also say that science sometimes doesn't lead you to the right answer all the time. And so I went through my undergraduate degree, which is a very science-based degree, guys, right? So I was, oh man, science and all this stuff. And you go through all these research projects. I was in an anatomy class with a cadaver. I'm looking at all these things, right? So science would say all these things that I should do when I get to be a trainer. Well, funny enough, CrossFit was not anything, or, it was nowhere, right? So I actually learned a lot of what I was teaching way outside of what the college setting was saying. And science has not even caught up yet. It's 2025. There's basically almost no research. I mean, there's a little bit, but basically no research on CrossFit, which is like kind of a big sport in our world, right? So science sometimes is about 10 to 15 years behind what we're actually doing in our field. That's just my example, but it's funny. It's like what I see versus what is being said at a college might actually be different. So in my field, it's very interesting in that way, where fitness, you almost have to have faith. Once again, bringing it back to that, like, I started studying some different people than who I was studying in college. I was like, wait a second, there's something different that I could be doing, and maybe it's better. And so, science is good and bad, but you got to be able to read between the lines sometimes, and realize that study, was good for a certain population, but maybe it doesn't fit everyone I'm training, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that science, what's true today is not what's going to be true 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Science is an evolving field, and all fields that are related to that, I feel like, are an evolving field. We're constantly learning new things. We're constantly taking in new information. We're constantly improving what we know. So, there's tons of things that they believed in thousands of years ago that we know are not true now. They're still just theories at the end of the day. And like having skepticism, a little bit of healthy skepticism is good for our society and is good for our advancement as we move into the future.
Yeah, and like we're all only human, right? Like you have to, like an important part of like studying sciences, and like even the sciences, not just the arts, is like you have to see through bias. Like you have to understand that these theories and ideas were made by groups of people, right? So like Isaac said, what was true 5 years ago might not be true tomorrow. What's true here might not be true in other cultures, right? So, and like you even look at the greatest scientists in the world, sometimes like they can't see through their own bias, which is just like, it's a very human thing. And again, tying it back, like that's where faith comes into it for me, right? Like you can look at the world, you can measure it, but we're all seeing it through human eyes. And to me, faith is like figuring out how to interpret the stuff that science can't explain or that doesn't quite make sense, but that I know is true based on my thoughts and emotions and kind of the more human side of my experience. So,
and if I can basically play off that, so I wrote a word down here that I just want to see what you guys think. So that kind of like truths, like what is a hard truth? Our flag just went down. Sorry. But relativism. So, I've kind of looked into relativism, and, Christianity and a lot of religions would say that's kind of a problem, right? So people have now, okay, there's subjective truth, there's subjective morals. They kind of question like, and we can go into this because I think you guys are such, like you're so good with all this stuff, right? Like, how do you know what's true and what is not? And I think part of the problem in our culture and our society might be that relativism is kind of been injected. So people don't know what's true. And they think that, for example, the 10 Commandments, it can be questioned, right? Or that's kind of our society in general. That's a hard truth to me, right? That's a hard truth. But, a lot of people don't think that. It's a subjective, oh, well, that's kind of true, but like, let me play off that a little bit. Or morals, right? Like, okay, well, the Bible says X, but, well, they're just saying that because, it's old and whatever. So I think that's kind of a problem in our society is relativism and kind of humans making their own rules. And we already have a book telling us what we should maybe do. But it's hard because it's like most of society doesn't believe in everything that the Bible says. Even if they say they're Christians, do they follow every single commandment? It's hard, right? So I don't know if you guys want to dive into that subject. It's one of the harder things to think about. And, I'd love to say I'm not a sinner, but I am, right? So we're all sinners. We all make mistakes. So I just try to live as close as I can to truth. And that's definitely hard, right? So relativism, just an interesting subject if you guys want to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unavoidable that it's always hard to figure out what the truth is in the present moment because we're only human. Our brains can literally only process so much information, right? And there's too much detail out there to actually know that I'm considering every important piece of the scenario before I draw my conclusion. But to me, like something about the Bible and like, religious texts that I find very helpful is like just to remember that these things have been around for so long. And like they're the stories that were worth writing down and sharing for generations. Like they're the lessons and the tenets that have allowed people to live fruitful lives and live peaceful lives for so long. And like look at how far society has come in the last 2,000 plus years. I'm definitely a numbers guy, and like that's enough evidence for me to be like there's something there, right? Like people I can read the same stories that some guy was reading over 1,000 years ago, and they resonate with me, and I can figure out how to apply them to my life and difficult, interpersonal situations or whatever it might be. And and help find peace and help help build something solid. So when I kind of had that realization, I was like, well, why would I not actually treat this for what it is, which is, a book with meaningful stories that has helped a lot of people. So
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is actually a really interesting topic that I'm actually glad that you brought up, because it's a topic that I've thought about actually somewhat recently. And I think as Christians, we believe in an objective truth. I think in the secular world, everybody's like, oh, morals are objective, they're subjective. Sorry. They think morals are subjective. But as Christians, we think morals are objective. We think we call to a higher power, a moral standard that's set in the Bible that we use to dictate our life and how we do our morals. And I believe that there is an objective truth, and I think that is the proper way that we should run our societies, make laws, or how our government should be run. I mean, really the question I have for people that believe in a subjective morality is, how do you govern with subjective morality? Because if you're not making an objective stance on something, like, how do you make like a law or like govern for it? It's like, that's something that I don't understand about there being a subjective morality, but that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, how can you actually seek justice if you can't measure it, right? Like, you need a way to measure it.
Yeah, which some societies are going through that right now, I think, in the world. And I mean, I think America is still, a place I want to be. That's all I'll say. I mean, I would not be in a communist country, for example. To me, right, they have completely taken away objective truth. Right now, people might find it, but those people are going to be swayed to not believe what the Bible says. Right? They're going to be swayed to believe what the Chinese communist government says. But that's why we're kind of lucky in America. It's like we have the ability to believe what we believe, and I believe very much so of an objective truth too, same as Isaac said and Matt. But it's funny, like, we're given the choice, right? And that's kind of cool too, right? So in America, I'm blessed and lucky to be able to raise my kids in that, and they're going to make their own decisions. But I'd like to actually go back, because when I was in the That Man Is You program, I was talking to these dads they had 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, whatever ages they were. And that's a lot of who was in my class. And a lot of them were saying kind of what the problem was with their kids weren't going to church, and they had lost their way with faith. And maybe some of them had kids at that point, but weren't taking them through a faith-based program of any type, no church, anything like that. Well, I think, if you talk to someone like that, if you talk to a dad whose kids won't go to church, and he's heartbroken, right? It's like, man, in America, we have the choice, right? And it's good and bad, but, for us right here, I think it's pretty good. And if we can believe in objective truths and be able to teach our kids and teach our society, it doesn't mean everyone's going to listen, right? I mean, people are going to make their own calls and own decisions. But, it's nice to be able to at least have open conversations about this stuff. And, and I do understand people disagree, right? Like, and that's okay, right? That's just how it's going to be. But it's just nice to be able to have these conversations with obviously these two, but, our audience too, about like, okay, and I don't know if we can put comments under and anyone wants to add to that, and anybody that's listening, but yeah, it's a good subject to at least discuss and like figure out maybe in the future, maybe we can push this forward and get more objective truth out there as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I always think about, and this is kind of like another reason why I believe there's objective truth, objective morality, is if you look at a lot of civilizations that have grown kind of in a vacuum, like there's all of these civilizations across the world, all of these societies that have kind of developed completely separate from our society or all the other societies that built. But when you actually look at their morals and like how they built their framework, you start to see a lot of similarities. It's like these are societies that didn't interact with our society, like at all when it was getting developed, but we all have collectively started to agree that like murder is wrong, stealing is wrong. Like it really starts to look like the 10 Commandments is like showing up way more in like all these societies that were not in cahoots, that it's like it's not like it's not a coincidence. Like I don't think it just like something that is just random chance.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of societies growing in different places but evolving to the same tenets, do you guys believe in aliens?
I think I should ask Elon Musk. Elon, you out there?
I mean, I don't believe in aliens because we haven't found any, but I would be naive to think that it wasn't possible. I mean, the universe is infinite, at least we think it is. And just the idea that we're the only living things that exist in an infinite universe is, I mean, it would be hard for me to make that assessment that it's impossible for aliens to exist. But my thing is we haven't seen any aliens, so I tend to lean towards that they don't exist. And the other thing is, I mean, it doesn't say in the Bible anywhere that God created any other life other than here on Earth. But even if aliens did exist, I don't think it disproves anything in the Bible. I think it's just another piece of creation that, you know, maybe God left it out of the Bible because it just wasn't necessary for salvation. It wasn't necessary for our journey. So
I have talked to enough people with these conspiracy theories that I would say there are a lot of things out there that would say there are aliens. But, you know, I don't know. I kind of agree with Isaac. It's hard without evidence, clear evidence. Now, I'm not saying there's not evidence. You know, if it was presented to me that there's aliens right now and we have them in the U.S., and I know a lot of people joke about Area 51 and all this stuff. And if there was evidence, yeah, I would believe it because that's kind of what would show me the way. There are conspiracy theories that I've seen. I've seen people talking about there are aliens and they exist right now as we're walking the earth. Once again, if I don't have evidence, it is kind of hard to make that call. I'm not a big conspiracy theory person, but it's something to consider. I mean, it could be happening, yes. So.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly if there are aliens out there, I would think they're not as advanced as us, or at least they're at the same level of advancement as us. Because if they were, because like I feel like a lot of times when we think about aliens in pulp culture, it's always that they're so much more advanced than we are. So it's just like, if there are aliens out there and they are so much more advanced than we are, I feel like we would see evidence of that. And the fact that we haven't just leads me to believe if there are aliens, they're at the same level of development of us, if not lower, or they just don't exist at all. That's my take on it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I could basically give like a dissertation on my thoughts on aliens. I don't know if you guys want to hear it.
Go ahead. Just give us a little bit, Matt. Come on.
You want to taste? You want a taste of my my alien experiences? So I mean, first and foremost, before I don't want, you know, obviously it's like kind of like a taboo, ridiculous thing, but also I think that there's something like we were talking earlier, like how kind of exploration and figuring out the world is like an inherently human thing, and it's kind of beautiful that God gave us those curiosities. And I will also say, like, something I appreciate about the Bible is that one of the big themes in it for me is that life is inherently a good thing, especially human life, but also life in general. So, you know, God created life and it's a beautiful thing. And so if it is out there, I think that's also a beautiful thing, right? Like it doesn't have to be exclusively for us here on Earth. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely get into the math of it if you guys are curious of some of the alien theory.
Well, can I just say, also, what's going on with the pyramids? Is that part of what? So, is that Matt? Is that part of what you're saying? Like with the pyramids and the way things were built, and at the time, like how did they do that? Right? Is that what you're saying with math, or what do you?
Well, so again, I know this is ridiculous, but when I say the math of it, I just mean like the expanse of the observable universe. So meaning like, you know, looking out at the stars, how far can we see and how much has that changed over the period of time we've been observing it? It's kind of like you can take, you know, it's kind of like the Big Bang Theory. extrapolated to like what's actually out there, how far can we see, and like if we kind of use that theory as a model and the rate at which stuff is moving in space, you can work backwards from there to figure out if it all started at the same point in space, how far would it have gone at this point, and kind of like how many particles and how much stuff is out there with like a mathematical model. There's actually this whole thing. If anyone actually likes aliens, you got to go. It's called waitbutwhy.com. And there's an article called the Fermi Paradox. The Fermi Paradox is like, again, for like alien nerds, basically. It's like, why do scientists claim the universe is so big, yet we've heard from nothing out there, right? Like, why is it that we only exist here? And it kind of breaks down like the number of planets and asteroids that exist. And something that is interesting is that basically for every grain of sand on the Earth, you know, or not astrologists, but like physicists, astrologists is like, you know, Leos and Tauruses or whatever. But physicists think that for every grain of sand, there's like a planet essentially. And so you can look at like the math of kind of, I guess, the atomic makeup of the universe. And like, if we look at chemistry, like how many of those planets would be inhabitable? Basically, the answer is a lot. And the answer is, does other stuff exist? According to this scientist on like waitbutwhy.com, not really a scientist, but this writer, yes, like life definitely exists. And then it kind of, you know, there's different theories as to why we haven't been contacted or whether we have. Anyways, it's fun to talk about, but yeah, it's like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like figuring out at what point is measuring actually worth measuring and at what point is it just ridiculous. So but yeah.
Yeah, and one interesting tidbit about just the universe and what we're able to see. If you believe that the universe is expanding, you know how light works, we're actually able to see more and more every single year that goes by, because light is constant. Stuff that's really far away, their light is finally starting to reach us. So we're actually every year or so, 10 years, I don't know, it's probably every year we see something different. I don't know, it might not be, but basically because light is traveling to us, what we can observe is increasing every single day. And we're actually looking at stuff that's in the past, which is kind of interesting. Is like what we can see in the sky might not be there now. Like we might be looking at stars that might be long gone and dead, but the light hasn't reached us yet so that we see it disappear from our point of view, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, dude. So one of the things that was like one of the most eye-opening things to me. So my freshman year of college, I took like the introductory calculus-based physics class. So it's basically like physics. But what was interesting about it was you learn about like reference frames, right? Which anyone who studied physics is familiar with. It's like Isaac said, light actually is particles and they have a velocity. So light can only move so far in a certain period of time. It's like if I'm able to move at the speed of light, even if I'm aging, the thing next to me that I'm looking at looks like it's frozen and suspended in time. Like if I were to move away from Kyle at the speed of light, I would be aging, but my view of Kyle is that Kyle's not aging because his light can't catch up to me. So it's kind of interesting to think of it in that way and realize like, hey, like maybe time travel isn't that crazy of a concept. Like light or time and space are all pretty interrelated. And yeah, then you get into that stuff. Next thing you know, you're talking about aliens. You can talk about, you know, and to me, it's just funny because like for me, I'm like a very mathy kind of guy. So like my faith is closely tied to my endurance, and my endurance is closely tied to like math and physics because that's what I've done with my life. Like I've done, I studied engineering. I became like a computer science guy. I'm working big tech. So it's like, what is it that I spent the most hours doing and like the most time working hard at? It's trying to understand, complicated math and interrelate, big systems of information and figure out how it all connects. Right. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny just like the way that all these things connect.
Yeah. And one more tidbit, and then I'll try to reel us back into faith and endurance. But we certainly know that we can travel forward in time. It's not really traveling forward in time, but I know that there's some physics with like black holes that basically the intensity of gravity can make time for you slower in relative to people on Earth. So like you could send somebody into space, they could hang out around a black hole, come back and only age a couple years, and everybody on Earth could be dead or way older than they are. So we can certainly move forward in time, but the concept of moving back in time, the one thing that I always fall back on that I think makes it not true is that if we did invent time travel at some point in the future that you could actually move back in time, I feel like we would see people coming back in time today. And the fact that we don't see that leads me to believe that it's impossible or we never discover that, unless they're just all doing it in secret and it's this big like conspiracy theory where they come back and hide from us. But
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
I just want to add, so Back to the Future, have you guys watched that movie?
yes,
Okay, so I will contend with this alien conspiracy theory that there has been travel back in time, because in Back to the Future 2, okay, I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. In Back to the Future 2, Michael J. Fox travels forward in time, but the Cubs win in 2016. They win the World Series. So in that movie, that was in 90 something, 93 maybe. The Cubs won in 2016. They won a World Series in real time. So you wonder, and then, okay, Donald Trump was on Simpsons years and years and years and years before he wins the presidency. Is there something to that? You know, and I'm not saying this is real or not. I guess it's just a fun subject. But, okay, Back to the Future, how did that happen? They were right. They were spot on in the year. And they were kind of joking about sports betting in that movie, and they were right about the Chicago Cubs winning in 2016, which, you know, if you look at the odds, they had not won in over 100 years. Why would they pick that year? So anyways, I think there might be something there. It's a conspiracy theory, but it's kind of fun to look at it. And you can see it in Hollywood. It's there. Like, you know, there's movies about it. There's some kind of truth there, isn't there? Like, there's something there that they probably don't want us to know. But it's still kind of a fun conspiracy theory just to, I mean, you can talk about the math and the physics behind it, but there's probably something there, I would say.
Yeah, dude, that stuff is everywhere. Like, I agree. So it's funny because, like, there's the math and science. Like, there's the kind of, you can explain it in, like, the nerdy way of, like, you know, let's break it down, talk numbers. And then, like, the amount of just, like, coincidence or, like, synchronicity or just, like, you know, funny things in the world is, you can't deny it, honestly. At a certain, like, I think most people have had things that happen to them where they're like, oh, deja vu, or like, oh, this is just kind of wild, right? And that's like part of what makes the human experience, in my opinion, like kind of beautiful. It's just the way you can kind of connect different dots. So yeah, it's just funny. Like, so I can tell you my personal story. Like, you can talk about aliens all day, but then one time, I swear I saw a flying saucer. So I was like, what's going on? In the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho, the most. Again, I don't really believe this, but I did see this thing flying in the sky with a couple friends, and we were like, that looks like it's an alien. And we watched it float away, and we were just like looking at each other like, is this a practical joke? That is also like a part of the country where there is the most alien sightings. But it's funny, like, you know, the difference between breaking down the math, the science, numbers, and then like something like that happens, and there's this kind of like emotional experience of like, I don't believe in aliens. I don't really think there's stuff out there watching me. But then I look up at the sky and something's flying by, and I'm like, I can't really tell what that is. And that kind of, you know, makes me a little concerned. But yeah, not just on aliens, but like, you know, on other topics too, on time travel or whatever. It's just funny, you know, just talking about the way they're, you know, the math and science and the emotional experience kind of relate.
Well, bringing it back, and I know Isaac was trying to reel us in. Can I bring us back? But I'll go to Jesus now. So, you know, we're talking aliens. Well, think on the earth when Jesus was doing his miracles. I don't know. I mean, to me, that's kind of like people are looking at this guy like, what's going on? Are you an alien? Like, you know, what is this, right? So I don't know how you want to relate it to what you're saying, Matt. It's probably not the same thing, but that had to be a very crazy experience for these humans. They're looking at this guy who's healing people with, you know, leprosy. He could do anything he wanted, right? He was doing all these miracles that we've all read. But, you know, I don't know if that relates to what you're trying to say, but I just think there's no explanation for that other than he's God's son. So there's faith because, you know, it's like that story is so real. And, you know, our clock is set on Jesus, right? Like, why is it 2025? in China, is it 2025? Well, yeah, right. Like we have the same year, but it's based off Jesus Christ. So to me, I mean, yeah, aliens could exist, but I know Jesus exists. I know he was there. I know those things happened. And I think that's what I was going back to with objective truths. I can't prove with evidence that there's aliens, but I can objectively prove Jesus did exist. People probably felt the same way about him as we feel about, oh, are there aliens? Like, is this guy real? Is this true? And obviously it was proven in the history of the Bible how he was so badly mistreated at the end of his life. But yeah, I think people might have felt the same way, like this can't be real, right? And maybe obviously they probably wish they had a chance to look back and say, wow, it was real. He was God's son, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that obviously people there that maybe weren't religious at the time could probably see these miracles being performed, and even people that were religious. I mean, obviously there were some Jews that were living in a time that like still denied him all the way up until he died, and even when he rose again, they still tried to deny him. But yeah, I mean, I think, and I really want to reel this back into just like more of like how I developed my faith. I think that there's undeniable evidence, historical record, that Jesus was at least a person that lived. And there is historical evidence that he did die on a cross. And there is eyewitness testimony that is pretty compelling. I think it's pretty convincing. And the reason I think the eyewitness testimony is pretty convincing for me is because these were people that, under threat of the Roman Empire, because that was the big authority back then, was the Roman Empire, that under threat of persecution, being tortured, being killed, they would not deny that what they saw was true. Jesus lived, Jesus performed these miracles, he died on a cross, and he rose again. The fact that I just can't believe that they would go to those lengths to keep up something that was a lie, that they would be willing to die for something that wasn't true. And that was enough for me, just knowing that, to just put my undying belief and faith into Jesus and what I believe is true.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, again, I believe strongly in Jesus. I believe he is the Son of God. But that was not, I didn't just, wake up and think that, right? Like for me, it was a lot of years of exploring and trying to make sense of the world without that structure. And it's funny because it's like these topics we're talking about. It's like when the math and the science behind things gets so complicated that people don't understand it, they seem surreal, right? And so like one of the classic kind of counter points people have about Jesus is like, what if he was just like a really smart guy, right? Like what if he was just very capable doctor? Like what if he was, right? Like that's awesome. Like when you look at it, like on first principle, it's like, okay, if we believe God created the universe and created, this, what we exist in, and science is like a very powerful tool, we learn how to measure things, we learn how to interact with it, and we accomplish things that people thought would be insurmountable. And then you look at the accounts of the life of Jesus, you look at, he was doing these things that by all accounts and record, like were beyond comprehension. Like it was incredible science. It was life-saving. It was, incomprehensible. Like it makes a lot of sense that would be someone who's very close to God, right? Like who is like a son of God, or the Son of God. It's just funny how much like I've just observed so much skepticism in my life about the whole thing. But when you look at it to me at least, when I look at it pretty fundamentally, it's like, if there is a creator, which I believe there is, and if there is a man who was able to do things beyond comprehension consistently, which I believe there was, and I think there's evidence of, what more is there to debate, honestly? Like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it like, despite, even if you believe that he was just a really smart guy that could do all these things, I mean, it's a miracle. It's still a miracle, regardless of if you take the supernatural element out of it. I think it's still a miracle because the truth is at the time they didn't have a cure for leprosy. And this one man who was seemingly just like everybody else, could just heal somebody with leprosy, but they had no idea how to heal leprosy. He could heal the blind. Nobody knew how to do that. Like these are miracles regardless of how you look at it. I truly believe that.
And then Lazarus, who is dead, a doctor can't, bring people back from the dead. So I would say that's even proof that he brought people back to life. And, even modern day doctors, my brother's a doctor, my sister-in-law is a doctor, my father-in-law is a veterinarian doctor. They can't bring people back from things that, if they're dead, right? Like, come on, that doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, doctors can do great things. I have a lot in my life. They're great people. They work hard. But I think Jesus was so different than what a doctor is, right? I think he, not only the Lazarus story, but I think when he came back and he showed himself, the whole Easter story is unbelievable. And it's just incredible that people, even after he was seen, after he died on the cross, they still disbelieved him. But the people that were there, it's like they were like in shock, one, but two, they believed then, right? I think they all said, wow, I finally believe. It took him that long. And yeah, like you said, Isaac, they denied him, right? Judas betrayed him, right? Peter denied him over and over. But, in the end, I think I wish I had Jesus on earth right now. It'd be so interesting what would happen on our current day society, right? And that's kind of a weird way to think of it, but what would happen if Jesus came today? Would we be ready? And that's the whole point of being a Christian, I think, is we're supposed to actually prepare ourselves for his return, right? And, we're supposed to be living our lives in a way where Jesus and God, obviously, if they come back, we are ready. And I think, if you think of it that way, instead of thinking about, oh, I can't wait for heaven, not saying you shouldn't think about that. You should obviously live in a way, oh yeah, I'm really excited for heaven, but live your life on earth the best way you can, and if God or Jesus showed up today, right, would they love how you're living your life, right? I kind of think of it that way every day that I get up. One, I'm grateful that I'm here, but two, I'm grateful that I have the chance to live a great life and help other people. And that's my calling, right? So I was called to do what I do, and my passion for training and now this podcast with these two, I think has led obviously us three to a great place. We're going to be able to teach people some stuff, but not only that, I think we're going to just be able to send a great message to the world. And I think that's kind of the whole point, right? And we talked about that, but just positive messaging and just really helping people as much as we can. And the people that are skeptical, I completely understand, because it's hard to believe. I get it. It's, if you read the Bible front to back and you look up every day and you're in debt with $1 million and you can't, you have nowhere, you're not, nothing's positive. The only thing I could tell you is there is a way out of that, and God and Jesus are your light. And, I think you can get to a better place.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. And I think, you bring up an interesting topic just about, if Jesus came back today, can I look at my life and say that I was ready? I think that's something that is actually, I think this is a really interesting topic for people that are Christians, because I feel like, people often forget this element of it because they look at, oh, well, Jesus is going to come. He's not going to come back in my lifetime. He's going to come back. It's still hundreds of years away or whatever. But I think we're supposed to live our life like he's going to come back any minute, any second. He's going to come back tomorrow. Like it's going to be a shock. Like you're not going to see it coming. He's just going to be back. So you need to try your absolute hardest to live your life right now, in a way that is going to make you feel like I'm ready for Jesus' return and I'm living my life the way I ought to. That's my kind of take on that. I don't know if you guys have different opinions or.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I would actually contest that, we don't know when our time on earth is over. And I believe that when it is over, I pray that I will meet Jesus and God and understand what it was all about. Right. And, I would contest that, you don't know when he's going to come, when you'll meet him, right? So yeah, you should make sure that your decisions in the life you're leading are honest and good, and that you're making decisions that you're proud of and that you can stand by. And if you're not, like we said earlier, being able to forgive yourself and being able to recognize that and focus on the next play. So
Yeah, that's also the other thing. You made a really interesting point. I was saying, like, you got to live your life like Jesus is going to come back every single day, but like tomorrow is also not a guarantee. Like, even just thinking about like, oh, like Jesus could come back tomorrow. Like, I could die driving home tonight. I could die. I could not wake up tomorrow. Like, so many things can happen, and it's like I want to make sure that like every second on earth that I can sit here and breathe and do what I love and talk to you guys and be on this podcast, it's a blessing, and it can be over in an instant. So I just want to know that as a Christian and as just like a good moral person, that I'm living my life the way I ought to and that I feel is right.
And then I just got a call. So Jim Irsay, the Colts owner, so Isaac loves the Colts, passed away at 65. I actually saw a few things on him. So incredibly wealthy man, but no one talked about that. They talked about how great of a man he was and how much he gave and how much, he woke up every day trying to help other people. And I don't know, that, that almost brings you to tears, right? Because I think that actually is what we're saying in this podcast. And it's great to have all these great successes in life, but this man at 65 has done things that I don't know, I probably won't be able to do. He owned an NFL team, but his impact on Indianapolis and the NFL world is something that I look like, wow, that's a giant, right? But he lived in God's light, that, right? So just wanted to call that out quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable that what he was able to do in his life is amazing. And I didn't know that much about Jim Irsay, but just from what I've heard from other people that did know him a lot better than I knew him, is he was an incredible guy. He loved the city of Indianapolis. He loved Indianapolis sports. He loved the football team that he owned. And he was very giving with his money and a very right and good person. And I 100% agree. He lived in God's light and he lived a spectacular life. And he wasn't a perfect person by any means. We're not all perfect people, but I mean, he did his best with what he had, and that's all you can do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's one thing to, sit in the dungeon in your basement and talk theory about about faith and religion and like how to find peace while having meaningful impact, all these important things. And it's another to actually be able to look out in the world around us and see people who are living proof of that, and who, can go out in the world and live openly by their faith and make, a very beautiful impact on the world around them. So yeah, it's awesome to hear, like, the impact his faith had on him, and to just, to be able to look back on a life like that and see, the positive impact that he was able to have.
That kind of brings you to, I mean, a lot of athletes, a lot of people in sports, they're great people, and I think, faith and endurance, once again, bringing it back to our topic, the perseverance of anyone in sports, their ability to fight through any tough situation. Jim Irsay, I know, I saw him in the news years and years ago before I ever talked about this with Isaac, but he was addicted to painkillers, had some stuff. But think about the comeback story of this guy, and that's kind of the point, I guess, of what we're saying is the perseverance, the faith, it just doesn't mean running long runs, right? It means endurance and in so many ways, perseverance through, hardships in your life. And I'll use a personal thing that happened to me that it's nothing to do with Jim Irsay, but I remember, so my wife was let go, severance from FAS. This was probably 2.5 years ago. And I still remember looking at everything in my life. And, in episode 1, I said I was debt free and all this stuff. And we were able to do some stuff through that situation that I want to speak to that a little bit on my faith and the endurance through that, because she was severanced, and so we had like 6 months where she was, severanced out from her company, and then had a little bit of unemployment, and then it ran out. And I looked at, her, and I looked at my kids, and I'm like, wow, should I keep tithing? Should I keep the money that I'm getting is so tight based on what just happened? And at that point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what does faith mean to me? It doesn't just mean that, the Bible's great, right? All those things that I believe, but now the money's tight and I got to support my kids. My wife hasn't been able to find a job. And I still remember when this happened. So she was looking for a job for around a year, could not find a job. It was just a really hard market. And for some reason, I just decided, I was like, I'm going to just restart all the giving that I was doing before she lost her job. And it was like, didn't really make sense. Math, Matt's talking a lot about math. It didn't make any sense math wise, made no sense, right? Like, I was like, why am I doing this? Other than the fact that I had faith in what I was doing, I believed that God and Jesus were on my side, and tithing is what I should do as a Christian. Most people probably would have been like, yeah, dude, what are you doing? Right? You stick to your budget. But I believed internally that my faith and endurance would get me through this situation. And funny enough, like a month later, she had multiple offers and got a great job. And now, I almost forgot about this, but that's what perseverance means. And on top of that, the faith, something hit me. I just was like, I have to start giving again. I can't live this life where, I'm in fear almost of the next month, right? And I wasn't in fear. I had money. I was debt free. But I would just say, like, don't. And this is anyone listening too. It's, maybe your spouse lost a job. Maybe you lost a job. Keep believing in God. Keep believing in faith, because that's going to get you through things that you don't even think about. And endurance races, yeah, same thing, right? If you believe that you'll make it, you'll get through a marathon if you just keep going. I've done it myself. It might hurt, right? But that's a personal testimony for my life that is more recent, and maybe that's why faith for me has been so strong, right?
Yeah, and I just kind of want to, just kind of piggybacking off of what everybody has said, I kind of just want to bring it full circle. We talked about Jim Irsay, we talked about your wife and her losing her job, but, coming back strong. I think ultimately, when you get to the end of your life, and I think it's pretty evident, you really start to realize just what is actually important. Because when you're approaching the end of your life, you don't care about all the stuff you have. You don't care about all the accomplishments you have. You don't care about what you were able to do in your life. You just care about the people that you were able to meet, the people you're able to impact, the people that you love and care about. Ultimately, that's what ultimately matters. And when people talk about, like we said about Jim Irsay, it's like all of the sinful things he did, or all of the not so great or smart things he did, like that all like goes to the wayside, and like all they're talking about are all the good things he did, all the people he impacted, all the great things he did for the city of Indianapolis. And I think that's just a great way to bring it full circle.
Yeah, totally. Well, Kyle, hearing about your story it just reminds me of the whole idea that we kind of talked about, but synchronicity, like seeing the way the dots all connect. And for me, that was like one of the biggest things in my conversion, like to being, fully Catholic. Because, it's kind of like a crazy story, but I remember like a couple of years ago when I was, wondering, trying to understand my own faith and religion. I was like sitting in my apartment just alone, and I was like, like, God, if you're real, like, give me a sign. And obviously like, today, I'm now having studied the Bible more, like, read the gospel more closely. It's like, you're not, that's not actually how you should go about it, right? That's a bit. But I remember sitting in my apartment, and I say that thinking like, this is ridiculous that I'm just sitting in my apartment even asking this. And then the light up in the corner blinked off and on. And it was like, you can say that's crazy. You can say that whatever, I was just being ridiculous. But like for me in that moment, seeing that, just that smallest little thing, I was like, okay, that's pretty unbelievable that I've been living in this apartment for whatever, a year, and I've never seen that light blink. And I just said, like, can I just have a sign? And it blinked. I was like, wow. And so, like, it's just cool. There's, when you actually welcome that kind of thinking into your life and like believing in that higher power, and kind of like you said, like for you it was like tithing or like embracing your faith in that way. For me, it was more just choosing to believe, like choosing that, I believe in God, and trying to kind of see those signs. Just wild the way that all the dots can start to connect for you. And so, like to actually put your faith into practice in life, like I've seen the last couple of years for me, it's like, it's the amount of like happiness and contentment and peace that I have felt, and like starting to actually have a religious practice, like a weekly ritual and even like daily prayers. It's like the results. I mean, not that it's about the tangible results, but like just, emotionally, it's like the results are compounding. Like you just see the way things stack on top of each other, and the way that it can bring you to such like a deep peace and contentment, and patience as what you're building around you continues to grow.
Yeah, I mean, since you guys both shared some of your testimony, I feel like I'll share some of my testimony. So when I was kind of coming into my faith, this was kind of right before I really like kind of went all in on God. I would say that my first year of college was rough. My first year of college was COVID. So, it wasn't at all the experience that I would have hoped for. And then on top of it, I wasn't doing well in the wrestling room. I was kind of getting my ass kicked every day in the wrestling room. And I wasn't really building great connections with the guys on my team. And I think kind of tying it back into what we were talking about at the beginning, at that time, my purpose, my value was determined by wrestling and how I did in the classroom, etc. So it's like I wasn't performing in the practice room. I wasn't able to compete. And my like original preconception of what college was supposed to be like because of the pandemic wasn't at all like that. So I definitely had like a period in that first year where I was going through like depression. I wasn't in a good spot mentally. And that ultimately led me to give God another chance, like really dig into God a lot more. And as soon as I did that, I just noticed my life got a lot better. I felt a lot happier. I ended up getting out of Purdue and going to Parkside. And obviously we talked about on the other podcast, my injury that I got while I was there. And it was just a lot of like, I got out of that situation because there was a lot of things going on there that just was not good for me. So I put myself closer to home, somewhere where I was more familiar, on a team where I already knew a good amount of the people. And I really focused on God and I dove into that. And I really saw positive outcomes come out of it. And it's really what flipped the switch in my head that I really need to give this God thing and this Jesus thing a try.
And then, I started training Isaac when he got back to Parkside. And dude, I remember, you were just a different guy. Like you definitely just changed a lot. And, I wouldn't say we talked about God and Jesus every session or anything like that, but yeah, it's just funny how it just makes you feel better, right? Like you just feel better when you take those things on. And those testimonies that we use, I think it's so powerful for people to hear, because I know other people are going through things right now. It's, it's almost a guarantee, right? And something even for me, like faith and the kids stuff that I talked a little bit on episode 1, but my 7-year-old goes to a public school, and one time, and this is just a lesson for, I guess, why you at least introduce faith or some form of religion with your kids. But she's at a public school, and they asked her like one thing, or what do you believe in? And she wrote, I believe in the one and only God, at a public school, which it's not a big deal. I'm just saying it was just like, that's what my daughter wrote on, she's 7 years old. I'm just like, so I recently have been listening to a little bit of this talk of, legacy. What does legacy mean? Right. And let's bring faith and legacy together. So this guy that I was listening to was talking about how it's probably more important for you as a father, or, I know Matt is about to get married. Isaac's looking for that beautiful girl still, but he will get that girl. I know it. But legacy of like, what do you want to pass down, to whoever? It could be a wife. It could be, whoever you decide that is. But this guy actually said, he's like, yeah, everyone talks about legacy of money, legacy of success, legacy of all these things. But he centered it on, and this had nothing to do with our podcast, but he said, the most important thing to pass down to your kids or whoever significant other you want is the legacy of faith. That's the most important thing. It's more important than how much money you give your kids. It's more important than any legacy you can think of. And it blew my mind, because I'm like, we were about to go podcast on faith and endurance, and this guy literally said that. I'd never heard that in my life, right? I'm a Dave Ramsey guy. I like the whole, the legacy, the money part, which obviously there is religion tied into that, but it kind of blew my mind. And then it made me think, like, making sure that I'm really giving my kids that legacy of faith, giving them at least that starting point, right? And I know you guys talked about, there's Christianity in your homes, and you kind of got to start, and I was the same way. But you kind of learn as you have kids yourself. Kids do what they want, but you can at least give them values. You can start somewhere. And I think with objective truth, with giving them at least, okay, Bible or whatever you want to use. And I hate to just use Christianity. And I know there's people listening that, you might be a different religion. That's fine. But using value systems, right? And giving them that legacy of, maybe how to be a better person later in life. I guess this guy talking just kind of blew my mind, and I wanted to share that with everyone.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It's funny. It's like, it's the classic, like you can give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. It's like, but when it's, when you're not just fishing, you're actually trying to like live your entire life. It's not easy. I'm sure it's not easy as a parent to like equip your kid or teach your child how to handle every situation. So kind of like going back to what we said in the beginning, it's like the beauty in a lot of religions, and especially I think for each of us in Christianity, is you have like clear guidelines that can be distilled down into pretty simple rules. So yeah, I think I'm definitely grateful that I found it at a time where I can aspire to try to develop it and give it to, if I'm fortunate enough to have a family, to continue to spread that. Yeah, so very fortunate.
Yeah, I think that is a very beautiful way to end on. Yeah. Are we ready to close?
Sure. I will say, like, obviously this stuff is not easy to talk about, so very grateful for both of you and for hopefully the community that we can start to build. Have an open mind, but also being willing to listen and discuss these kind of sensitive subjects in a genuine way. So yeah.
And something on top of that, I agree with both of you. This is a great discussion, guys. This is special, and I know that I want to say, like, if someone wants to comment or reach out to any of us and like, hey, can you give me a call, or can we talk? Or, it sounds funny, but in the world we have today, if you need someone to talk to, or, I think it's funny. We can create friendships through this, or, if someone's looking to go to a church, I think us three we're a valuable resource. Obviously, we're not priests or anything, but if you're struggling with something like that, reach out to us and we can help you out too, right? So we're really trying to positively impact people, and that could be multiple ways. That could be, sending you to a church that maybe you're local to, or helping with anything that you need help with. So, yeah, that's a good end.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very powerful discussion. I had a good time talking with you guys about it. And I just hope that we're able to plant that seed in our community. That'll hopefully at least have other people start to look into this whole God and Jesus thing. But yeah, I mean, with that, this has been episode 3 of the Rest Period podcast. I just want to thank everybody out there that's listening, and we're signing off. Thank you guys.
Too easy.
Too easy. Next week, more sports.
Rest Period will focus on sports.
Still just a burning man. Just a burning man. Woo! Maybe I'll go to the desert, find myself in the Joshua Tree. If we pass in the night, then just hand me a lighter. Tell me you burn just like me. I'm a little bit steady, but still a little bit rolling stone. I'm a little bit heaven, but still a little bit flesh and bone. Little foul, little don't know where I am. I'm a little bit holy water, but still a little bit burn.